Getting the Pokemon in the right position to be actually dealing with what's in front of him is going to be key here. But that being said, let's get into this match. Both of these teams are really interesting, and I'm really intrigued to see how they're going to be facing down against each other here. Right, so Joe's side of the board here, we're going to see that Landorus to start, paired next to that Grimmsnarl. The Zacian right away coming out on Gabriel's side, paired next to that Umbreon that we've seen featured in majority of our matches today.
So the Landorus into the Zacian is definitely a solid start for Joseph here. You get that initial Intimidate immediately onto Zacian. The reality, though, is that even with that Intimidate, Zacian is still just that neutral attack, right? That's a lot of damage. And you see Gabriel's actually willing to just stay and go for a Behemoth Blade right away. I think one thing that makes the dynamic of this matchup really tricky for Joseph is if you max anything other than Metagross, you take so much damage from Behemoth Blade, even with the Intimidate. And so Joseph's actually going to make a proactive switch here, not going to max that Landorus, probably, fearing something like a Protect on Zacian turn 1, but Gabriel ends up making a nice play, ends up getting a lot of free damage here across the board. Looks like it's going to be Metagross and Yveltal switch again, though, so, at least you take the Behemoth Blade and the Foul Play decently well. But, Zacian is still just looking so strong here. I think for Gabriel, probably just want to consider switching it out, maybe back in. And then Umbreon can, of course, go for Yawns at any point as well.
Yeah, even for Zacian that's been intimidated and using a not super effective attack, it does a nice little amount of chip damage to this Metagross here, which is certainly scary. I feel like Zacian's one of those Pokemon too, it's such a fast Pokemon to begin with, and then the ability to just raise its attack, it's really one of those Pokemon that you have to take into consideration when building these teams and piloting them, or else it can just roll through everything. It's such a powerhouse.
Absolutely, yeah. And going once again, content to just stay in with that Zacian. Now Joseph could, of course, switch Yveltal out into Landorus. That gives you an Intimidate. You could even potentially max Metagross here. And you saw Gabriel try to cover for that option, right? Foul Play is really interesting here. It's actually going to be Metagross making the switch. And so that's going to get another Intimidate off if you bring in the Landorus, but it's actually just going to be Grimmsnarl coming out. So here's the thing, right? Without that much offensive pressure from Joseph's side, sure, you intimidated the Zacian once, but it's still just getting a lot of free damage across the board right now, and Joseph's not doing very much to pressure in return.
Yeah, there's... if Gabriel's just... Even after being intimidated, Gabriel's just sitting there, chipping away slowly and slowly. That's still stuff that's being done, while Joseph's just pivoting these Pokemon in and out here. Does get an Oblivion Wing to start healing a bit of damage up off of the Umbreon here. Umbreon, of course, just hitting the Foul Play into the Grimmsnarl to try and get that Metagross before the swap here. I feel like not much has really been done here on Joseph's end. There's just been too many switches at this point, and Gabriel's just going full speed ahead here.
And just as you say that, there is another switch. It is going to be Landorus coming in, but the reality is that everything is slowly getting chipped away. That chip damage can be really essential, especially if you're able to knock out that Landorus. That means no more Intimidate, right? And so it does add up pretty quickly. Protect is actually really cool on Umbreon. You don't see that very often on Umbreons these days. And Joseph is going for the nice play of going for Oblivion Wing, so that at least heals a lot of the damage that you're taking. But the reality is that the rest of Joseph's team can't heal up, right? Behemoth Blade is still adding up really quickly. This damage is not going anywhere, and Yveltal's the only one that can actually heal it off. So it's like Landorus, Grimmsnarl, and the Metagross have all been chipped away a little bit. Gabriel hasn't taken any damage on the Zacian yet, and the more you chip away Landorus and Metagross, those are the actual ways to deal with Zacian, right? Yveltal, unless it actually has Heat Wave, which can turn into Max Flare, is not going to do anything into the Zacian here. So I think Gabriel's very content with how this early game has played out. Joseph switched so many times just to vie for positioning, but hasn't really gotten too far with that thus far. And Foul Play is such a strong option here because so many of the attackers on Joseph's side are physical as well.
Joseph not opting for a switch this time, and this Landorus be taking a big Behemoth Blade. This is a -1 Zacian too, and still picking up a decent chunk of damage with each one of these turns here. And this Umbreon just fishing to get this Landorus out of here. Once this Landorus is out, there is no more Intimidate cycling, and just one switch in and switch out from the Zacian just gets it back at full attack.
And Landorus finally gets a ton of damage on the board with Earthquake, and that's definitely good damage. That's what you want to see, but is going to go down to that Foul Play. And Gabriel hasn't made a single switch in this game, whereas Joseph has switched more or less every single turn. And so Joseph at least finally is able to get a huge chunk of damage onto the Zacian at this point. I feel like, you know, Metagross is, yeah, definitely the right switch in here because Grimmsnarl just doesn't do anything and it's just far too passive. You can maybe set up screens with it, but that's effectively it. But Gabriel now, you know, contemplating a potential switch, and that's nice. It also allows you to reset the Intimidate slot the Zacian has taken, and then you can come back out at +1 attack. So really big decision here right now for Joseph's side is who do you max, right? Metagross actually feels like the best option because you have you're able to boost your defenses. That's really valuable, specifically against all these physical attackers. Maybe if it has Ice Punch, it knocks Hailstorm into the Garchomp with the Landorus. And tricky thing with Yveltal is even as a max option, it just doesn't really do that much damage. But I think this switch makes a lot of sense. You reset those attack drops and conserve Zacian for the late game.
As well, maxing the Yveltal denies it the ability to use Oblivion Wing to get its health back, which it slowly has been doing off of this Umbreon here. So we are going to see a Dynamax finally come out. Joseph opting to Dynamax first here, and surely it's going to be going for it. Nope, it's going to go for the Yveltal actually instead of the Metagross, opting not to be going for those defense boosts and potentially just a speed boost instead.
Yeah, and actually, you know, the speed boost can make a lot of sense. The basic question is whether Yveltal plus Metagross can actually pick up a big KO. Now, that is a big max airstream to knock out the Umbreon, and if Metagross maybe read into this Landorus switch, went for something like an Ice Punch, that would be an absolutely incredible play and could definitely swing the tides back into Joseph's favor. But looks like it is just going to be an Iron Head. You know, it's always consistent, gets you guaranteed damage, doesn't quite knock out the Landorus. And so now this is my big question. Because you chose to commit the Dynamax to the Yveltal rather than the Metagross, Yveltal, you know, does okay damage, but it's not amazing damage output. Can a double up from the Yveltal and the Metagross actually knock out Garchomp, which is presumably going to Dynamax? I'm not even sure a max airstream into an Ice Punch is enough to pick up a KO. And if not, that's really going to be a disaster for Joseph here. So, you know, while I think we were expecting the Metagross to max, I think the Yveltal max actually makes a lot of sense. The only question I have is, do you actually have enough damage output right now? That Yveltal does not have Life Orb. And Life Orb is typically, you know, seen on Yveltals that like to max. Salt Vest is obviously a very solid item as well, but given that Gabriel's team is purely physical, it won't do Joseph any favors here if that is indeed the item. So Gabriel, I think, certainly will want to max the Garchomp right now, and then the big question to ask is, does Joseph, first of all, double up into the Garchomp? And if he does, is that enough for a one-hit KO? I'm not 100% sure it is.
Gabriel opting last second. Oh, did he get that max off? It was hard to tell. He kept going back and forth on what he was wanting to do for this turn here, but he does last second decide to go for that max Garchomp here. I mean, you said max Garchomp does so much damage here if Joseph isn't able to pick up this KO. The Airstream does come out Joseph's side and does about a third of the HP, but is letting this Metagross get a second speed boost here to try and hit a big attack.
Oh, it's Ice Punch. Is it enough? No, it's not.
Not enough. The Garchomp hanging on. The Yveltal not being able to do more damage, making a big difference here as this Garchomp hangs on and hits a huge Max Quake into this poor Metagross to take it out of the match.
That's such a clutch survival. If Garchomp goes down there, I mean, Gabriel basically just plays the game without a Dynamax, right? And then you have an Yveltal and a Metagross, both at +2 speed. And yeah, Gabriel would be left with just the Zacian at around 50% as well as the Landorus, but Garchomp hangs on with just a sliver of HP, and that just might be enough for Gabriel. So really clutch survival there, but you could see Joseph's game plan, right? He was basically hoping, hey, if I get a speed boost onto the Metagross, Metagross can actually do really well into Gabriel's team. And so in the end, this is the downside of Yveltal as a Maxmon. If it's not running something like a Life Orb or a Weakness Policy, its damage output can just be a little bit mediocre. And Garchomp, yeah, you know, doesn't really like taking ice type attacks, but the Dynamax makes it significantly tankier, obviously, doubling its HP. And so now Gabriel in a interesting spot where the Grimmsnarl is not really a concern at all offensively. So it feels pretty safe to actually just double up onto the Yveltal slot here, and that just should do enough damage. I don't know, even if it doesn't pick up a KO per se, you know, it's just really tough for Joseph to actually do enough damage in return.
Oh, certainly. We see that Max Darkness coming out from the Yveltal, hitting into the Zacian, not picking up that KO either. I mean, unfortunately, no life or anything. It means this Yveltal's not doing too much, and that's two Pokemon that needed to get taken out that unfortunately got to stick around for one turn too long, as this Zacian fires back with a big Behemoth Blade into this Yveltal, doing a bunch of damage for the Garchomp to just pick it off and get rid of this scary bird.
Yeah, I mean, this was a really tough matchup for Joseph. I think he found a really clever way into it, but he just missed out on the KO on two really critical Pokemon. If you KO that Zacian, I mean, the Garchomp actually shouldn't be able to knock out the Yveltal because of the screens coming out from Grimmsnarl, and then Garchomp would also faint from the Life Orb. So I think if the Zacian actually went down there, Joseph, would basically win the game. I wasn't really expecting it to because, Zacian is just not resists all the attacks that Yveltal has here, but in the end it was closer than I anticipated. Only 8 HP away from actually knocking out that Zacian. KO there would actually probably have mean the game victory for Joseph. So in the end, it looks like Gabriel is going to take it, but just by the sliver of a little bit of HP. And it reminds me a lot of the last match we saw with Gabriel against Jonathan Evans, where it was kind of the opposite case in that one. In that game, Jonathan Evans, all of his Pokemon survived with just a sliver of HP, and this time it's Gabriel's Pokemon hanging on just to, just with such low HP, but that's all you need.
Great. Thunder Wave coming out from this Grimmsnarl here. I mean, it's Grimmsnarl against the world. As it manages to at least dodge the Rock Slide just to get slammed with this Behemoth Blade here, as this seals the first game off for Gabriel here.
Yeah, that was really close though, and I mean, I think credits to both players. Joseph, once again, finding this, I think, really unique game plan.
And Joseph comes up with to try and tie this up.
And I think it all starts with the lead matchups, and Joseph is going to mix it up a little bit this time around with that Landers and with that Metagross. And I don't know, yeah, I really like this decision because I thought Metagross was a really strong candidate as a Dynamax option in that last game. Landers here this time gets an Intimidate off into that Zacian. Zacian isn't that scary when you're using Metagross because Behemoth Blade obviously doesn't do very much damage, you resist it, and you've gotten the Intimidate off here. What could be scary, though, is, of course, Umbreon still pressures with Foul Play, right? And so, in this position, I think it makes more sense to max the Metagross over the Landorus. Landorus here could just go for an Earthquake. That could actually potentially activate your own weakness policy, but the risk in doing that is, of course, fearing a potential Foul Play coming out from Umbreon to just KO the Metagross if you were to activate your own policy right away.
For sure. This is already such a different start to the first game. So instead of the double swap, actually opting for that very first turn Dynamax here with that Metagross, looking to apply some super early pressure here. This Zacian, of course, does get to hit this Behemoth Blade into this Landorus. I mean, if you can get the Intimidate cycle out, that certainly helps the Zacian moving forward here. Is going to be an Earthquake, doing some good damage on the other side of the board, but does get to proc his own weakness policy off this Metagross. This Metagross is going to be dealing some good damage going forward, especially starting with this Steel Spike into this poor Umbreon, which just gets eliminated here.
Definitely a much stronger start to the game for Joseph this time around. Like you mentioned, Sierra, in that last game, he spent a lot of time vying for a good position, and in the end, he was actually able to get that positioning out. But in the end, it wasn't actually enough to, damage-wise. And so this time around, off to a better start, gets that knockout. You also get a defense boost, which is actually feels really critical here because you're going up against primarily physical attackers. And so that is definitely a really, really nice mix-up by Joseph. And so now the question is, can a double up from Zacian and Garchomp knock out Metagross? If you're Gabriel, one play you can consider here is going for a double up onto the Metagross with the Sacred Sword, which would ignore the defense boost, and then a Max Quake with the Garchomp. Joseph can go ahead of that by max guarding Metagross and just going for an Earthquake. I think that could be a really strong play here, but your fear maybe is you don't want to play too passively, especially because Gabriel's Garchomp actually has that Sword Stance. Joseph might feel pressure to just go for a Max Hailstorm in that Garchomp, because if you max guard here, Garchomp gets a Sword Stance off. Feels like Garchomp can actually just one-shot everything afterwards.
Of course, the Landorus cycling out, bringing that Grimmsnarl in instead, as Gabriel does opt to go for that Dynamax here. I mean, I like the switch out with the Landorus to be able to save that Intimidate for later, especially with these two physical attackers sitting out on the field here. This Garchomp, though, as of the moment, is going to be dealing some good damage if given the opportunity to. And Zacian, just with that Sacred Sword, going for a little bit of damage here, and that Garchomp going for that max quake. Is it going to be enough though?
It is!
It is. That Metagross goes down after one turn of max, and Garchomp getting that momentum going for it. That big KO, and this is a little bit, that was a really key KO. I feel like that was pretty big.
Absolutely critical there. I mean, it feels like in both of these games, right? Like if the KO, or for in the first game, for example, Joseph gets the KOs he needed, that just feels like game over, but it hangs on with just a sliver of HP. And then now in this game, if the Metagross survives, you can retaliate back with a Max Hailstorm. That would just knock out the Garchomp. And then suddenly, Gabriel just doesn't have a Dynamax to play with anymore. But Garchomp picks up the KO. It doesn't take any damage in return. It's going to be really tough for Joseph to claw out of this one at this point, I think, because Metagross was the main primary damage dealer into that Garchomp with that Ice Punch or Max Hailstorm. Now that that's no longer out, part of the trouble also is that this Grimmsnarl from Joseph's end just does not do any damage. And so it's kind of a common syndrome we've seen throughout the course of today, where you have a support Pokemon and it just stays on the field and isn't able to actually offer very much outside of the first, 2 turns where it gets up the Light Screen or the Reflect, for example. And so, sure, you get Reflect up right now, but the Grimmsnarl's not doing any damage. How do you actually stop the Garchomp at this point?
Oh, Garchomp, so strong if left unchecked. Zacian, though, will take the opportunity to hit into this Yveltal. Yeah, I mean, that Metagross going down was just such a big deal. And now this Garchomp's left to just hit another Rock Ball into this Yveltal and just try and bring it back down to that Grimmsnarl. As soon as that Grimmsnarl is left by itself, it is game over. And I mean, Joseph still has Intimidate cycles. Of course, that Landorus is in the back, has brought both of these Pokemon down already a little bit in attack and continue to do so, but it's still a very tricky situation to be in here.
Yeah, absolutely really tricky, and the Intimidates help, but the problem is it means you'd have to switch one of the Pokemon out. If you're switching Yveltal into Landorus, that's another turn with no damage on the board. And if you're switching Grimmsnarl out, it is going to be Yveltal into Landorus, so, just trying to stall this out as much as possible, get rid of that Dynamax on Garchomp, and certainly can respect that play. The main issue for Joseph, once again, is this. There's just no damage, it feels like, once the Metagross goes down. So even though you do get the Intimidate off, like, what can Zacian, or what can Grimmsnarl really do? The answer is, I guess, use Thunder Wave. Hope for some Paras, that's always the out. So Joseph definitely playing to his outs right now, but it's still looking really, really tricky.
And you have to play to your outs at this point in the loser's bracket. One more win for Gabriel will eliminate him from competition, and the Parahax works. The Zacian is going to get paralyzed here, so the Grimmsnarl doing what it can here, and I mean, a couple more turns of momentum slowly gaining in his favor could potentially be a good thing. He's got to get a little lucky here.
Yeah, and at this point it feels like, you can switch the Grimmsnarl back out into Yveltal, go for an Earthquake with that Landorus. The Garchomp here has a pretty interesting moveset. The Landorus in the back for Gabriel, such a strong switch-in option though. That intimidates the opposing Landorus, which makes it so much tougher, and it's actually going to be the Landorus switching in for the Garchomp slot. I like that a lot because Garchomp feels like the endgame sweeper at this point. You can't Thunder Wave the Garchomp, and the Zacian's already paralyzed, so I think, this switch definitely makes a lot of sense. I don't think Rock Slide was KOing Landorus at -1 attack anyway, and the Dragon-type attack was going to be Outrage here, and you can't guarantee that hitting into the Landorus slot. So Joseph's Landorus content to just go for an Earthquake. It's going to knock out the Zacian, but this resets the Intimidates onto Gabriel's Garchomp. You get that back in, and it's looking really, really strong.
Yeah, getting the opportunity to be getting that Garchomp back in with full attack is definitely big. This Grimmsnarl just opting for some damage into this Landorus, doing what it can here to just get some little bit of chip as that Garchomp comes back out onto the field here. So this is definitely a tricky one, but the max is over, and I mean, the Landorus is staring down against each other. I mean, this could, it's tricky, but there's still a game here.
Yeah, at best I feel like you need to hope for Rock Slide misses and then get enough damage to actually pick up a knockout, right? Both of these Pokemon have Rock Slide. At this point, Joseph's taken so much damage. You can't really switch out that Landorus because then you just give up Yveltal. The Intimidate's not actually worth it. And the first set of Rock Slide comes out, does not miss either Pokemon. And Gabriel's second set of Rock Slide is going to come out, no misses either, so that's just going to do so much damage. I feel like at this point, you're really hoping to not flinch and maybe get a Spirit Break critical hit onto the Garchomp. There is going to be no flinch, so the Spirit Break at least will come out. Is going to target in that Garchomp, but that's not really going to be enough damage.
Oh, like, Rock Slide, I feel like whenever I go for it, I always miss it, but Gabriel able to connect all of the Rock Slides. Doesn't pick up the flinch though, but that's still so much damage done out on the Grimmsnarl here, combined with that Sand Chip. This Yveltal, I mean, is definitely not too healthy and is definitely not going to appreciate any of these rock slides that Gabriel has up his sleeve here.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, at this point for Joseph, you go for maybe a Sucker Punch critical hit onto either of these if the Yveltal even has Sucker Punch. If there's no Sucker Punch hit, you're basically hoping for double Rock Slide misses here. No Sucker Punch comes out, and Gabriel connects with every single Rock Slide so far. That's gonna... Is that enough to the Grimmsnarl? It is. Okay, yeah. So it's enough for Grimmsnarl. Let's see if Landers can connect
taken
the final
out of
blow.
here. Just comes down to this one. Connects as not any Rock Slide misses coming out from Gabriel here. Those Pokemon clutching it up, and